everyone's smiling, isn't it? Well, one day, 2 Kansas cows were standing at the edge of their pasture looking over the fence, and they were watching a huge milk tanker truck come down the road. And as it passed, they read the signs on the side of the truck. They said, milk, homogenized, pasteurized, grade A, fortified with vitamin D, both plain and chocolate. The one cow turned to the other cow and said, "It does make one feel dreadfully inadequate, doesn't it?" Whether we joke about our inadequacies or we boldly stand up and declare who we truly are in God's eyes, the truth of the matter is that there never, ever has been anyone quite like us. We are unique. Our own personal sphere takes its meaning from us. We name things, we judge things, we bring things into being. Without us, the world would not be complete. Without us, God is not complete. When we're little kids, it's very natural for us to express who and what we are. Much to the consternation of some of our caregivers, the laughter shows. Well, that's how we are. We've been created that way, and from birth until the area, time of awareness, we are free to live who and what we are. But then there comes a time with being socially aware, and we want to fit in. We get guarded, and we have that urge then to quell ourselves and to pull back. And it truly causes us pain when we know that there's this way that we're acting because we think that fits us into society, and yet we really are someone quite different. That incorrect image becomes solid, and the cover-up becomes solid. Some of you know the story of the Golden Buddha. In the mid-50s, there was a monastery in Thailand that was being relocated, and a group of monks were put in charge of moving a large clay statue of Buddha. At one point during the move, though, a monk noticed that a crack had begun at the base and was working its way up. So they called a stop to their progress for the day, and they made camp. After dark, when everyone else was asleep, one monk came out with his flashlight, and he was checking around the Buddha. His beam caught the crack, and something reflected back. He checked it again. Yes, there was something sparkly there, so he cracked off a little bit of the base. There was something bright and shiny. By the time the efforts were finished, all the monks were out there cracking that clay off. They stood there and they beheld a 9-foot-tall, solid gold seated Buddha statue. Research explains that the Buddha had been covered with a thick layer of clay, which was then painted and later inset with pieces of colored glass. They went to this effort to protect the Buddha from being stolen. The Thai monks knew what they were doing. Well, long about 1767, there was an attack from the Burmese army. All the monks were killed, and the secret of the Golden Buddha disappeared. It took almost 200 years and that relocation attempt for the secret to be rediscovered. We are like that statue of the Buddha. We often wear an outer cover then that hides who we are from the world and from ourselves. And under that cover is something solid, solid gold. This solid gold treasure is our spiritual essence. It's who we were created to be at the beginning of time. We're told that we're on a spiritual journey. It's one of becoming real, of rediscovering our authentic self. Webster tells us that authentic means genuine, true, original, no imitation. In other words, we're discovering our actual identity. So this spiritual journey then encourages us not only to imagine who and what we are, but to welcome who we are, to, with words and actions, live this out, to be who we are. Now, this does pose some problems, though. Think back for just a moment to when you decided to learn something new, or maybe develop a new skill. It was hard to admit that we were rollerbladers or chefs or skiers or bird watchers. And if somebody would call us on the phone and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" "Oh, nothing. Oh, nothing." Quickly, we'd deny it or minimize it. But as we grew into this authenticity and it got a little bit more comfortable, then we could say, "I'm a tap dancer." Right, Vicki? Yes. Yeah, she says no. Yes. We could say, "I'm a gardener. I'm an artist. I'm an author," and say it with more confidence. For most of us, though, it's a slow process. And that's how it is expressing that Christ within. As we imagine it, as we welcome it, as we live it, as we rediscover it. The truth of it, our solid gold essence, shines forth more clearly. And it can take a lifetime or longer. How do we encourage this? Well, we have a brief how-to manual in Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. We find it in the parable of the talents. And just a quick paraphrase. Remember, a master goes away and leaves his servants with talents or money to take care of, each according to their ability. The expectation is that they're going to increase this resource. And the first two do increase their master's wealth. But the third servant buries their portion because of fear. The master returns and commends the two servants for a job well done, but he rebukes the third for not putting their talent to work. The message is simple. Use our abilities, use our gifts. The giver expects us to do so. And not developing our abilities or our talents is unacceptable. Sue Monk Kidd writes, "The soul craves experiences that offer it the rich depths of God." What are some of these experiences that will take us to our depths? We know they differ from individual to individual, and what appealed to us 10 years ago doesn't appeal now and maybe won't appeal to us in the future because interests change and things happen in life. But consider the silence, solitude, holy leisure, prayer, journaling, reading spiritual literature, maybe the Bible, laughter, meditation, deep encounters with nature, walking, considering symbols and images, and on and on. All these nourish us and encourage us to live the transformed life. Now, there are times in life when we realize that we're feeling uncomfortable, we're dissatisfied, we're disappointed, most often with ourselves. Maybe we're thinking back to a missed opportunity, maybe an interaction that didn't quite go like we wish it would now, maybe words or actions that actually hurt someone. We remind ourselves that people fall short. It's the human experience. It happens as we naturally live and grow. Longtime editor of Daily Word, Reverend Martha Spock, encourages us with this thought. You are essentially a spiritual being, but you are at the same time a human being. As a human being, you may seem far from the goal of spiritual perfection, but human reasoning cannot tell you how far or how near you are to it. We want to reassure ourselves that no mistake is so serious that it can change the character of God. That God that is loving to us exactly where we are, who we are at this point in time, where we do sometimes fall short. We have divine worth. We are precious. We are beloved. One of my favorite readings from Jim Rosemurgey's book, The Gathering, is, our problem is that we do not know what we are. We think we are flesh and blood. We think we are what we do, what has been done to us, what we say to others, what others say to ourselves. The question is, what does Spirit see when it looks at us? The answer, an image of itself, precious, loved, and cherished. And so we should treat ourselves respectfully. And we use self-talk that builds us rather than diminishes us. And we treat ourselves with kindness, much the way we would a dear friend or a child in our care. All this inner work sometimes results in us making outer changes. And those changes can take some getting used to, not only for ourselves, but our family, our friends, those in our sphere. Living life anew, and the actions we take look and feel different. So to use some fairy tale analogies, the little pig in us doesn't run away, but stops and takes stock and says, what is mine to do right now? Just right now. And the Rapunzel in us stops the helplessness and waiting for a rescue and takes a simple action by climbing down herself. And the paper bag princess side of us faces her own fears and looks for small ways to help others. As we make changes within ourselves, they can be met by many varied and unusual reactions from those in our life. They might celebrate them. They might disregard them. They might simply put up with it, or they might be very uncomfortable. And these reactions are understandable because changes, even minor ones, can be very disagreeable. Whether we're feeling it, others do too. But we continue, and we give people in our life time with it. A fellow recounted a conversation that he had with a fellow traveler when they traveled by train across Canada. He introduced himself, and he found out that his seatmate was a musician who, as a child, had performed on the violin across the United States and Europe. She'd been considered a child prodigy, one of those rare children who was endowed with exceptional abilities or talents that comes from someplace beyond where we're, most of us anyway, living right now. In her early 20s, though, she made a change. She suddenly set aside the violin and she picked up the viola. She already had amazing success with it. Now, this gentleman commented that her decision surprised him. She already had a promising career as a violinist. He had a musical background, so he knew that the repertoire for a solo viola is limited, and the part assigned to violas in most musical compositions is much less notable and complex than that which is written for the violin. He asked her why she would change from an instrument that has such color and is viewed in the orchestra in favor because it moves so many. Why would she then pick up one that is so quiet and for the most part unappreciated? Her answer was simple and direct. It didn't require a pause or any thinking. She replied, "I like its voice. It's more me." The musician was content to play her part well and then simply to recede as the music was taken over by the more dramatic and flamboyant instruments in the orchestra. She was content to play from her heart rather than to seek the acclaim and the fame for something that didn't come from the fullness of her being. She was being true to that solid core at her being. She wasn't satisfied with bearing her talents, but she made a change and she developed her skill. Okay, for those of you keeping track, we're talking about unity principle number 2. We are spiritual beings created in God's image. The Spirit of God lives within each person. Therefore, all people are inherently good. And it doesn't stop there. Unity principle number 5, knowledge of these spiritual principles is not enough. We must live them. Our poet laureate, James Dillett Freeman, writes, "I am only one, but I am one, unique, extraordinary individual. I am a special creature of God, the good omnipotent. Can that be anything but good? I am a child of God. Can there be anything better than that? Let me be who and what I am, for then I shall be who and what God made me to be." Our good news is that on a cosmic scale, we cannot not be true to ourself, to that Christ within. That solid gold essence of our individuality will be rediscovered and revealed. We will be true to that inner Christ self. And like we're reminded in Course in Miracles, only the time we take it is voluntary. Eric Butterworth writes, "When the ties that bind the mind are broken, and a person is introduced to his real self that has no limitations, the bells of heaven ring for joy." And so we take our time, and we make a change, and we put new talent to work in life. We might take up a new and less dramatic instrument that speaks to our heart in the symphony of life that we live. And at our center, we continue to reveal our solid gold essence. So as we conclude, C.S. Lewis's comment rings true. We meet no ordinary people in our lives. And that, friends, includes us. We can do this. Amen. Will you take a moment now to meditate and move into the silence? In this space of quiet, in this space of peace, in solitude, I am present to the presence of God with all the wonder, with all the majesty. I am. I am. In simplicity, I show up. In authenticity, I show up. With an open heart, with a focus, I show up. I am a whole and holy being, created at the beginning of time. I am whole and holy. And in my awareness, that solid gold essence is revealed with reverence, with awe, with true appreciation. I remember. I remember. What potential, what promise, what invitation. I am a whole and holy being, created at the beginning of time. In the silence. In the silence. The silence. Recognizing my value, acknowledging my worth. I open to my holiness, to my wholeness. And I see that life unfolds, and it is with confidence, determination, and intention that I take the next step, that I stretch out my hand, that I speak the word. For truly, this is the truth of my being in all ways. Coming back to this time and this place, and with a deep breath, I underscore the value and truth in these words and sentiments. Amen, amen, and amen.